Thank you so much, Dr. Neeraj and Professor Kali. It was such an insightful session. And I must say, that we learned a lot. We learned how exactly fetal bovine serum is produced. And I must say it's a terrible sight to watch, which gives us a cue that, why fetal bovine serum needs to be replaced in the industry. So we are already going late by 5 minutes. The audience who are watching us on YouTube, please use the YouTube platform to post the questions, and the audience who are watching us on our website, please use the WhatsApp button which is given there and post your questions. So without further ado, I'll move to our next session, which is the market landscape of cultivated meat, global perspective. This session is between Robert E. Jones, a VP of Global Public Affairs, Mosa Meat, and Ms. Sutapa Sikdar, Head of Marketing from Clear Meat. So over to you, Sutapa.
Good morning, everybody. I am Sutapa, heading the marketing programs in Clear Meat. Today we have Mosa Meat for this session. Mosa Meat is a Dutch food company headquartered in Netherlands. They are into the space of cultivated meat and make the most kindest beef burger. Hi, Robert. Welcome to this chat session for cultivated meat to have a global perspective. May I request you, Robert, to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, Sutapa. Honored to be here. I appreciate the invitation. My name is Robert Jones. I serve as Vice President of Global Public Affairs for Mosa Meat. As you said, we are the company that pioneered cultivated meat technology, and we're focused on making beef. I also have the great honor of serving as president of Cellular Agriculture Europe, which is an industry association that we were part of building, focused on market entry, regulatory approvals for 14 companies across Europe and Israel. So happy to be here and talk a little bit about the industry today.
Great to know that. So definitely now taking it over, as you said, and as it has been described in the website, you build the kindest beef. So hopefully all my questions will be very kind, which you can answer progressively, and let us take it forward.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So my first question will be, related to the awareness. So why I'm asking this question, the reason behind, there are lots of confusion in the market about this. So I need to understand what level of awareness was there in your market when you were launching this product, and how you have leveraged, or how marketing has leveraged it out, so that awareness is unanimously been spread across the market and the population know about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great question. Well, just for clarification, we haven't entered the market yet. We're working on regulatory approval for our beef in a variety of geographies around the world. And there's only one approval in the world so far. I believe you talked to Josh Tetrick earlier today, and Good Meat has a product on the market in Singapore, and others are getting close. To answer your question, though, in concept, awareness is super low. With consumers, with stakeholders, even with regulators who are going to be responsible for approving these products. Even though it feels, for those of us in the industry, it feels like it's been many years, and we're ingrained in this. Average consumers, average stakeholders are still just beginning to learn about these products, and there's a lot of education to do. I view it, I kind of think about the famous diffusion of innovation graph that shows, there's about 2-3% of innovators, very early, and then very early adopters that make up still less than 10% of the total market. And these are folks who are really paying attention. They're reading all the news. They know a lot about cultivated meat so far. But the vast majority, early majority, late majority, and laggards of consumers, we have a lot of work to do. But the good news is that there's enough early adopters and innovators that will kind of match our production scale. Because when all of these companies first enter the market, we're going to have fairly low production because we have to build up capacity. We have to build new supply chains. And so there's more than enough consumers for the early phase of products, but it will take a decade plus really to educate the rest of consumers about these products.
Okay, that's, I mean, like, that's a good insight actually, but I'm really curious when you said there are only 10% like who are aware. So what are the activities you are garnering around it, so that the market penetration is more to that? And how you're working towards that, how you're achieving, so that the awareness is built, layer by layers and continuously from 10 to 12%, from 12% to 15%, how that graduation, how you're trying to focus that, how you're trying to build that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I generally think about these audiences in concentric circles, but you have to start at the center first. Is who are the people who have the power to actually authorize the product for sale? And so our audience starts very small first, and it's the regulators around the world who are responsible for determining our products to be safe and authorizing them for sale. And that's where many companies are focused right now, is really educating and raising awareness, dispelling misinformation. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, some of it harmless, some of it intentional. And working on really providing accurate information and proving that our products are safe, because they are. In fact, arguably, cultivated meat will be safer, healthier, and certainly kinder for people on the planet than many conventional meat products. But then you move out. Once you start getting authorizations, then you need to start focusing on the partners that you need to build the supply chain and those very early consumers. And a lot of the work that we're doing right now is sort of more traditional public relations. It's generating press, it's generating buzz, it's generating coverage, a small number of tasting events. And then, of course, there's a couple of products that, by Good Meat for sale in Singapore, and that's gotten quite a bit of coverage around the world, and that's good for all of us. But then you move out to the next concentric circle where you start, you're going to market, you've got a product for sale. And I think most companies will pursue sort of a gastro approach first. And by that, I mean, our production scale will be relatively small at first. And you want to make sure that first introduction goes very well. Because we're not making widgets or a new tech gadget. We're making food, and people are very passionate about food, which means the first time they try it, they better have a good experience, because they're not going to come back and try it again. So you have to really nail that first introduction in terms of taste, texture, sensory experience. And so I think many companies will enter with a gastro first approach. And by that, I mean restaurants, food service, where they get to use chefs as the messenger. Right? Chefs are beloved, they're credible, everyone loves their favorite neighborhood restaurant, and they trust their favorite chef to really deliver a product to them that meets their values and is mission aligned. And so the first phase of a lot of this marketing will be through culinary professionals. And then after you scale up the product and you kind of move to the next phase, then you start talking about retail, grocery stores, but that's further down the line.
Got it, understood. I mean, there has been lots of emphasis on the end users, and somewhere in between you are emphasizing on building the kind of influencers who will be augmenting these products into the market. So there is a bridge you are looking for who will take your products to the end users by using the influencers. When I say influencers, so the emphasis on the chefs, right? This is exactly what you're trying to replicate it out.
Yeah, that's right. Chefs are critical influencers in that way. And then that early phase, those early adopters who try the product and have a good experience, they begin to talk about it. They're credible influencers in their own circles, and you start to build a center of gravity and momentum from there, and start working your way up to that first big phase in the innovation curve of the early majority. And that's where a lot of companies will struggle, right? Is because now you're moving to folks who have never heard of the product before. They're going to have a lot of questions about how it's produced. It might seem strange or new or weird. And so building on the credibility of that early phase of first adopters and chefs and influencers, as you said, is going to be really important.
Wonderful. That's good to know, because we are also working on those similar patterns, and we are definitely looking for those inputs to that. So may I know, like, how different you are from other brands or other I mean to say other brands who are cultivating beef in the lab, or what could be the differentiators between you and them?
Yeah, great question. Well, there's a few things. One, Mosa Meat, we have the great advantage of being the pioneers of this technology. So we have a unique position in the market already because our founders were the ones that really made the breakthrough on this technology, and others have followed. But there's something else that's unique, as you said. Our founders and our company has stayed laser focused on beef. And actually, bovine cells are some of the hardest cells to work with this technology, as compared to avian or fish, other seafood. So bovine, that's a challenge, right? But we've taken that on because our company is very dedicated to helping solve the climate impacts related to beef. And so that will be a huge part of our value proposition for consumers. And I want to be clear about something. We don't consider our product to be, we're not targeting vegetarians or vegans necessarily. We're trying to come to market with a product where we are replacing beef with beef, and offering hardcore carnivores an alternative. Because there's so many people who are meat eaters, myself included, where it's going to be very difficult to have that behavior change shift if you can't shift over to a product that has the same sensory experience. And so Mosa Meat has been very dedicated to making fully differentiated muscle and fat tissue, so that we can replicate the sensory experience of beef. And that will be our highest value proposition, is making a product that's indistinguishable but better to the conventional beef product that people are buying today.
That's really good to know, because this is something insightful which you have shared with us, that the target audience is very vast and you're not exclusively targeting the vegetarian or the vegan here, because the market is so vast. And I'm also a meat eater. I do eat meat. I eat everything, like from beef to pork to everything, because I'm a foodie basically. So
Yeah.
good to know that your audience is not very precise here. You're targeting the larger audience, and we can leave out the small tickets there so that we have a more market penetration actually.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody has already made a conscious decision for climate or animal welfare to shift their diet, good for them. Great. I mean, they're doing a great thing for the planet and animals. The challenge that we're going to have in order to meet our long-term climate goals and environmental goals, biodiversity loss, is that many people won't make that decision unless you make it really easy for them, sort of almost the laziest option possible to switch from beef to beef. And so that's the pursuit that we're going for.
Okay, so now when you say beef to beef, so you're not planning to expand right now. So the all focus will be on the beef, right? Beef and beef products.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that we'll leave open the possibility of pursuing other species in the future. But right now, and throughout the history of our company, we've been laser focused on making beef.
Only making.
And there's not that many companies around the world who are pursuing that. There's a handful. Aleph Farm, probably
Aleph Farm is correct.
Yeah, the biggest example, a company that's in our consortia and CellAg Europe, who we work very closely with. And I think they have a very similar ideology, is that there are beef eaters in the world that they're not going to switch unless you give them a product that really meets their sensory experience and expectations.
True, I agree completely to this. We have spoken so much about the market, so much about the market penetration, the awareness. So now comes the question, like where we are building the product. Now, ultimately, this product has to be launched in the market, right? Like whenever it goes live, might be 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line, so whenever you're building or creating your pipeline. So what I really want to understand, or like from a marketing person also, and also from a clear meat angle also, how do you plan to harness this awareness which you have created, and how will you ensure the supply chain or the demand generation is built, and how you will join that? So this is something very important, because ultimately sales has to happen. So how this sales will be augmented, how this demand generation will be created, and for this, what kind of activities you are planning so that in the market it's seen, the sales happen, and the demand generation is also increased. So there are lots of bridges which has to happen. So how do you plan to take this up in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot wrapped in there. And one of them being the single biggest challenge for our industry, which is scaling up. And so you said, how do you marry these two? And the demand generation is going to be just as important as supply, because we're having to build an entire new industry, a new value chain, a new supply chain, from the hardware like bioreactors to the inputs like the growth media and all of the ingredients that go in. And on that side, I just want to address something very quick. It's critically important for our industry that we be seen, but not just be seen, but we are a new adaptation of agriculture, and we have a proper place in the agricultural ecosystem. And by that, I mean, sometimes people have a tendency to create this binary environment where they assume we're a replacement for agriculture, that we're a threat to conventional farming. And that's not a reality. The reality is that meat consumption is expected to rise between 40 and 70% in the next 30 years. You're going to go from a 1.4 to 1.8 trillion US dollar meat market. So the pie is growing, and we can't meet that demand without destroying the planet. In fact, you would need, if you were going to feed that many people meat, you would need about 2.5 planet Earth's worth of resources.
That's huge. That's very huge.
Yeah, it could be devastating if we try to use today's methods to meet that demand. So you have to layer in alternatives. But it's really important to remember that the inputs for our growth media, what we feed ourselves, the cell feed comes from plant nutrients. This is plant wheat, pea, soy, sugar beets, etc., amino acids, glucose, all the things that an animal would have turned grass into. And we're going to need relationships with farmers to grow those vegetable proteins, plant proteins, in order to be reduced to raw ingredients for our cell feed. So that's one really important part of building the supply chain, is relationships with traditional agriculture. This doesn't happen separate from them, it happens together. And so I wanted to bring that up because it's just as important as how are we going to create demand for the product. And initially, as I said, when we go to market, our production scale will be much smaller because it will take a decade plus to really ramp up these supply chains and build all of the factories necessary. And we have to do that in a very responsible way, right? We need, you can make meat in a much more sustainable way, but you have to use renewable energy to do it, which means at the same time, we need to be working with governments around the world to be growing the energy accessibility for really clean energy. In the Netherlands, we have the great fortune of having 100% wind power, or lots of wind power. So we have access to that. So as we ramp up production, it'll be fairly small scale. And right now, with just innovators and early adopters, we've got more than enough demand for what we'll be making. But we can't stop there, right? I mean, you have to really ramp up the marketing efforts to show the value proposition of switching to these meats, how it's better for the planet in particular, and grow as you go. And it is going to be a tricky balance of not overpromising, being able to meet the demand that you have, and strategically grow it at the same time.
I completely agree with you, because there are so multiple stakeholders in this, who needs to be brought under one single platform. They need to be married, to achieve the end results, to create those awareness, to create the sustainability model going forward. So there are like lots of activities which has to run together to achieve the ultimate goal to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too, I think it's really important to say is that no one company can do this.
I was about to say that.
Yeah. I mean, this is why we worked with our partners to form Cellular Agriculture Europe, and then now Cellular Agriculture Europe and AMPS Innovation, the U.S. Industry Association, and APAC Society of Cellular Agriculture have all joined forces. And so the three cultivated meat industry associations in the world are now collaborating in a global alliance for cellular agriculture. And we're doing that because we consider ourselves pre-competitive, right? I mean, someday we'll be fighting it out on the grocery store shelves and restaurants, but a lot of things have to happen before you get to that point. And we have a lot more shared challenges than we do opportunities right now. And so we are joining forces, and the industry is going to have to work closely together. So like for example, when I saw the FDA give the green light for safety to upside chicken in the US, we all celebrated because that's really great for the whole industry. We're not even thinking
also
about
celebrated it in India. Like, wow, this is something, a good news, which is coming up for everyone.
Yeah. One more box checked. And that comes back to another point about your question about growing demand and consumer acceptance. It's going to be critically important that consumers feel like that understand these products are safe, which means that we have to have we have to welcome those robust safety reviews from regulators, because it's going to be a critical point of building confidence that people should try these products.
I agree. Now, yes. So I do have a question on the consumer part also, but before I proceed to that, there is one question adding to this, what we have discussed right now about the value proposition, about the value chain, the supply chain, what we are discussing here right now and has been shared by you. Do you think that the models which you have just shared with us, the inputs, can this be replicated across all geographies to achieve success? Can all the meat building organization, they can also follow the model which you have just proposed across?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that there are 3 critical variables that every company in this space is going to have to meet. First and foremost is taste. It is the driver for food. I mean, you said it, you're a foodie. Most people, they will not put something in their mouth that they don't like. The second is price, right? The economics of a household always are a very powerful driver. But the third is the cultural relevance of the food to somebody's daily life. And that's the one that is really going to vary geography by geography. You know, introducing a hamburger in every region of the world doesn't make sense. But luckily for us, we're making a minced beef product, and there's a minced beef application for our product in almost every culture in the world, right? And so, but demonstrating that your product comes in a culturally relevant way, but with the taste, texture, and price point that makes sense for people at the point of sale is going to be critically important. So I think every company in the world, if they have their eye on those 3 critical variables, and if they, enter the market in a way through credible messengers, like chefs, like home cooks, influencing home cooks, I think they can be successful.
Okay, as you said, there are 3 different parameters, critical matrices which decide or which elaborate or define the market if someone has to enter. So coming back to this particular matrix or this, I have a question here, because I'm from India, and when we talk about beef, it has lots of sentimental values. If you're aware that majorly in India, we do not consume beef. Okay, so barring me, like I could be an exception to this, but rest majorly they do not. So what kind of marketing strategy will you adopt for such markets? Like surrogate marketing, will it be effective, or do you have something in mind to penetrate such geographies?
Well, this is a very good question because one of our founders, Dr. Mark Post, who is famous for being one of the inventors of this technology, he's a cardiac doctor, and Dr. Post would be the first person to tell you that you shouldn't necessarily eat more red meat. It's not something that you should seek out to do, but if you're going to eat beef, you should eat beef that's as sustainable as possible. So I think from a moral point of view, we're not necessarily in the business of pushing people to switch to eating red meat that aren't currently eating it. That's not our goal. Our goal is to get current beef eaters to change their behavior. And so I want to be very careful about this is a cultural sensitivity question, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's also a moral question.
Yes.
And so I think what we will be focused on are the places in the world that currently have high beef consumption, or where it's expected to grow rapidly. And that China is a perfect example of that. Red meat consumption is rapidly increasing as middle classes rise in China. And that simply is not sustainable for the planet. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's answering. Yeah, I mean, yes, of course it has answered. But from strategic point of view, I really wanted to understand, for such companies, I mean, what could be the actual strategy? Of course, you have made it very clear you are not getting into that space and respecting the cultural aspect, the sentimental values. I completely get into that. So when you spoke about being sustainable, we are all marching towards it. So this sustainable industry, which is very big, when people say this is a booming sector, this is a sunshine sector, which is coming up, So I want to understand, or like my question is, how big is big, if I have to define or describe? And what could be the milestones to penetrate the market when we say this is big? Number one, I want to understand what is big here, how to define that big, what big is big, and what could be the various milestones which has to go or that can be described or to penetrate the different markets which you are planning.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd probably maybe answer that best thinking on a global perspective first. So again, right now, the global meat market is just over about 1.4 trillion US dollars. So as big goes, that's big. That is a great opportunity for us to enter. And a lot of people are currently questioning their diets, their behavior around food. Now, that said, the market penetration prospects in terms of the major consultancies in the world and predictions have varied widely. One of the more conservative ones is the Boston Consulting Group, which thinks that by 2030 that we're somewhere around a little less than 1% market penetration. Which seems insignificant, but when you consider what 1% of $1.4 trillion, it's still real money and a real opportunity to grow. And then there's some very much like McKinsey, A.T. Kearney are much more in the like 30% range by 2030. I think that's probably overinflated, but still is huge. And so there's 115 companies around the world right now making cultivated meat. That probably will contract a little bit in the economic environment, but there's still huge opportunity for growth in this area. If you had 30% of the global meat market, and remembering that the global meat market is also rapidly expanding at the same time, you're talking at $800 billion plus a year of market opportunity for this space. So I encourage all of the entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about entering the space. It's a tough time right now, and the economic environment's a little bit rough. But there's plenty of opportunity. There's plenty opportunity in market share here.
No, I completely agree. Even this question has actually come up. I was reading one of the journals, one of the write-ups from A.T. Kearney only, and there was an article from McKinsey as well, as you said. So they had suggested this 8 billion and they have mentioned there. So from there, I just wanted to understand, everybody is claiming big, but what is big? So I am not able to, and we are not able to tap that. So as you said, even if we are able to tap even 1% of the 8 billion, and we all are millionaires, then from that monetary aspect, also we are able to solve the problems of the future, So that is something very, very big and critical, I think. But only thing is that we have to stick together, keep motivating us, and working for the complete synergy which we have to build together.
I agree with that, and particularly focused on the metrics of making the planet a better place, right? And here's another point I want to make, is that I think it's really important. Not only do sometimes people get into this posture of trying to position cultivated meat as a binary, it's mutually exclusive with conventional farming. Sometimes people get into a posture of comparing complementary proteins against each other. right? And it's like either plant-based or cultivated meat or precision fermentation or insects or traditional meat. And the reality is that the problem that we have created for ourselves on this planet is so wicked and so huge. You have to have all of those things. You have to have all of those tools in the toolbox in order to have a chance for us to meet our climate goals and turn biodiversity loss around. And so it's really important that all of us in the complementary protein space lift each other up, right? We don't consider ourselves a competitor with plant-based products. We consider ourselves to be a completely separate offering. And in fact, great potentials for great partners. Because one of the best ways to make a plant-based product better is to add cultivated animal fat to it. And then you get more of the sensory experience and the taste that you're going. So all of the opportunities for partnership, but more importantly, not tearing each other down and lifting each other up is going to be important if we're going to really survive this and meet our goals.
No, I agree to that completely, because there is something in the future I think can happen through a hybrid model, because everybody individually I don't think can work that way. So there needs to be a kind of hybrid that has to be built, because everybody is drawn towards one vision and we all are working towards that vision only, so that the sustainability is approached. We are able to feed the world, which is our tagline actually. So we are drawn, I mean, especially the entrepreneurs who have built this, the founders who might have a vision to build this, and they have created this. So everybody is drawn towards this vision and we are being move towards that. So we are attached to that vision, which you very correctly said, biodiversity, saving the earth, then the plant part, I completely agree to that. But in coming to everything, which is the future aspect, which is futuristic currently, and we have just started the steps. It's a very nascent stage. So ultimately, everything will depend on the success story, that is the acceptance by the consumers. We are building a product that has to be accepted by the consumers. At the end, this will be a success story. But what do you think would be the triggers and barriers for the consumers, to accept or to reject this product? So the triggers and barriers, as a marketer or from company's perspective or as a general person, I would like to understand.
Yeah. Well, I think the first and most important thing is accessibility, right? I always get a laugh out of all of these current studies about what consumer acceptance of cultivated meat is likely to be like, because the reality is that all of these respondents that they're asking in these surveys have never seen it, touched it, smelled it, or tasted. So you're asking them a question very much in the abstract, which is difficult to answer. So having access to the products is going to be the game changer, right? And right now there's cultivated meat being sold one place in the world, and that's Singapore. And with the vast majority of people on planet Earth are never going to go to. So it's again, it comes back to being critically important that we get these regulatory approvals, that we start entering markets beyond Singapore, Europe, the United States, other parts of Asia. And then once consumers have accessibility to it, and then they see their friends and family and trusted messengers trying the product and talking about it in a positive way, I have extreme confidence that we'll be successful. And so but it is going to come back to those other three variables that I talked about, is that we have to nail the taste, right? And we have to, the first generation of products are going to be things that are easier to make, like chicken nuggets, like minced beef, but we can't expand just on that. We have to improve the texture of these products, and we have to keep pushing the boundaries of the technology and moving towards products that mimic whole cuts, that feel, taste, and have the sensory experience of cuts of meat that people really are used to. Now, that will take a while. Science is a bit far from that, but that has to be the ambition of the industry.
True. So the thing is, like, the products has to be visible for the consumers to try, taste it. Then might be from the feedback per se, it's like more like, I will not say barter system, it's more like a give and take. They will come back with the feedback, what is working, what is not working. Accordingly, I mean to say, the organizations or the companies, they will also try to figure out what is working, and accordingly they also will be coming out with a new basket, new category. But before that, all these categories or the basket, this needs to be visible in the market or in the shelf for the consumer to understand there is something in this category, we need to take it. But this category to come into the shelf, we also have to work with the regulators. So what do you think that time or the effort is going to take place so that the regulators come into picture and they give approval, and why it's being stopped? Like, how long should it be taking it ideally, or how long will it take actually now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, Singapore did a great favor for the world by giving the first approval, and it took these products from being science fiction and abstract to being real, but still untouchable for a lot of people. But the FDA green light for upside in the U.S. is huge for the industry. And the reason being is that regulators around the world are really paying more attention after the U.S. has given a safety green light. Now, there's still another step. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has to authorize the product. But I'm seeing more activity from regulators around the world than I've seen in years. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that now somebody has broken through the barrier and sort of put themselves out on the line and said these products are safe. And now there's a sense of global competition. And so I think the speed of regulatory authorizations is about to grow exponentially, because China has added cultivated meat to their 5-year food strategy. You have incredible amount of activity in Asia. Korea has just created an entire new ecosystem for cultivated meat. The Prime Minister of Japan last week said they're going to create an ecosystem for cultivated meat. You've got the FDA approval in the US. The United Kingdom, post-Brexit, is looking at changing their law to make approvals easier and faster. And so now all of a sudden, major countries don't want to be left out. And so I think that sense of global competition is going to speed this process up. Now, let me say, though, it's important for us as an industry to never sacrifice safety, right? We may want our approvals to be as fast as possible and efficient. That's fine. But we can't be advocating for cutting corners. We have to welcome a robust safety review by these regulators. And get that green check mark from them, because that is going to be so important to inspiring consumer confidence.
I completely agree to what you have said. I really, because the whole world is coming under one forum and building that ecosystem, and it's really good to know that they have been pushed, or we have been pushed. Everybody is moving in the same direction. So like I did have my set of questions on this. May I ask you the last question, like if you are okay with this, and we will conclude the session with that?
Sure.
Okay, so I started my question with awareness. So ending my question with awareness again. So my question, it will revolve around in the market, like there are different protein sources. So this is coming back to the competition here. So as there are lots of different there are different proteins in the market, and there are different protein sources in the market. So what are the means and tools do you think can demarcate them, or demarcation of the cell-based cultivated meat products will have distinctly from the rest?
Yeah. Well, I come back to targeting current meat eaters, right? People who are hardcore carnivores. There is nothing on the market right now. There's not a single plant-based product. There's not an alternative complementary protein right now that the average American steak lover is going to tell you is as good as beef. And I'm not taking a dig at anyone. It's just it's going to take time for these products to get to having an analog of the sensory experience of real meat. And so that is really going to be, I think, the number one value proposition for cultivated meat, is providing the real sensory experience for meat that is going to be very, very difficult to ever replicate with plant-based product or any other complementary proteins. And again, we don't advocate for more people eating meat than currently do, but we have to give people a way to switch. And so I think hands down, that's the value proposition of cultivated meats.
I mean, this words are actually music to my ears, you know, because we are into cell-based cultivated meat space. So this is very, very motivating and like very good to know, good to understand this. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for your time. Thanks for taking out the time from your busy schedule and joining this session. Thanks a lot.